This is a Defocus Media production. What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover.
And I'm Dr. Jennifer Lyerly, resident optometry nerd.
And welcome to Defocus Media, optometry's #1 podcast, where we discuss the hottest topics, latest technology, eyewear, practice management, and more. So sit back, relax, and defocus. What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover. Happy Tuesday. I hope the new year has been treating you well. I'm super excited because I got an all-star lineup like always. Today, we're going to touch on grand rounds. We're going to talk about contact lens, and we're going to add a little more flair to this conversation this evening. Today, I'm surrounded by nothing but greats, all-stars, optometrists, optometry students, and it's going down. So friends and family, I'd like to welcome Dr. Brittany Wright. Dr. Wright, how are you doing today, my friend?
I am doing well. Glad to be back with you, Dr. Glover.
Glad that you're here as well. And also, I got to give a shout out to my eye care shenanigans brother, Dr. Jeff Fardink. How you doing today, my friend?
Another beautiful day in Richmond, Virginia. Happy to be here.
I love it, my man. And then last but not least, our optometry student. Matter of fact, I'm going to say you're the optometry student of the year. How about that, Jacob? But how are you doing today? Future Dr. Jacob Wilson. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Check it out. We're super excited that each and every one of you are on the lineup today. And before we get started, I want to give a special thanks to our partners, our colleagues, our friends, our industry partners, Johnson & Johnson Vision. We really appreciate you partnering with Defocus Media to bring eye care to the forefront, but also to always make sure that we're well educated and we have all the tools and resources to get successful. For those that have never been to our grand rounds, we have a lot of fun. We present a case, we break down the case, and then we bring the amazing and great Jeff Fardink on to really socialize the concepts or the case with these two experts that we have in here in front of us. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and get started. Myself and Jeff are going to fall back, and we're going to let Dr. Wright and Jacob take lead and build from there. Does that sound like a game plan, everyone?
I'm ready.
All right. And also for everyone that's tuning in, we are giving away some Amazon gift cards this evening, 3 $100 Amazon gift cards. So make sure you're tuned in, make sure you register because you could soon be a winner. All right, Dr. Wright, let's take it from the top. We're going to drop off and let you guys have a lot of fun this evening. All right.
Sounds good. All right. Jacob, you ready to roll?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. Well, of course, we will get started just with a thank you again to our sponsors, Johnson & Johnson Vision. This is really just a good opportunity for us to take some clinical pearls from our experiences in clinic. You as a fourth year, kind of on your way out as a student, and just patients that I've been able to see and come across that I think we could pull some pearls and help some of our colleagues. As Dr. Glover mentioned, here's our lineup for the evening, and we will go ahead and move into our case. So this is a patient I saw, 47-year-old interior designer. Chief complaint, one short line is, my contacts aren't working anymore. Doesn't really provide any other context to that, just says they aren't working and that's just what it is. So we ask a couple more questions, ask about, what type of lenses the patient's in. We learned that she's in a multifocal. It's a daily, has been in it for about 3 years. Can kind of recall that first experience in the multifocal, saying that she's had a couple visits that it took to get it right. And just overall likes the convenience of it, but doesn't really give us a whole lot of detail, like how, what is really going on with this patient. So I picked this in particular because it gives us the opportunity to kind of tie back conversations and how we pull case history out of patients early in the exam to help us later on in the exam. So Jacob, I'll ask you, as you hear this kind of complaint, what are the type of things you're thinking about to ask this patient? What are you trying to tease out to kind of get a better understanding of what's going on?
Yeah, I really want to understand in a situation like this, what the patient's expectations are, what they're looking to do. So for example, I saw that this person's an interior designer. So I want to understand what their day-to-day looks like. How much screen time do they have? Are they on a phone? Are they on a computer? The thought I had of an interior designer is they're probably walking around with an iPad or something like that in homes, having to switch distances from distance to near to intermediate all day long. So I really want to understand their needs and what they're looking for. And it's really important to get as much info up front as possible, because these multifocal contact lens fits can end up being a lot of chair time, a lot of different visits if we don't get all that info right up front.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. So some things that I think about for just asking the right questions. You hit it right on as your first thing is, what are the expectations? What are the goals? What's the patient hoping to get out of contact lens wear? In particular, when we think about transitioning into a multifocal, the optics of that lens are very different than your single vision lens. And so we want to have an understanding of what the goals the patient has, what is their day-to-day activity, their visual demand, because all of that can help us pull together and identify what's going to be the best technology in a contact lens to help this patient out. Also, as you mentioned, vision and comfort. When we hear a patient having a complaint of, oh, my contact lenses aren't working, there's really two things in most cases that aren't working. Either they can't see well or they don't feel good when they're in the eye. So those are things that we can, again, start to tease out as we're asking these questions about lens wear. What is their care routine? Fortunately, this patient's already in a daily. So if we're talking about modality, we know that they're in a daily. They like that convenience. How can we get a lens that's more comfortable for them to be able to wear in a longer period of time? And so from there, we do get some more information. So asking some of those questions, we find out that specifically the patient's having trouble reading some display signs in the warehouse. So this was something new that I hadn't really thought about, but as an interior designer, this patient would spend time in a warehouse and she would have to basically be looking at signage as she's pulling items for like curating a space. And so there's that distance demand. So we kind of hear, okay, we've got a distance problem. As you mentioned, the computer or near work. So she also brings up computer use. So she's on the computer for a while, but starts to get some eye strain, even to the point where we're grabbing for readers. And that's over the contact lenses. So that's also something to key in. We've got a distance issue going on. We've kind of got this near problem going on. So how can we pull this all together? As far as comfort, the patient mentions about lens wear. She's wearing them about 10 hours, but just has this sort of lens tolerance where she's aware that she's got the contact lenses in. They aren't bothering her enough to take them out. She isn't really doing anything about it. She just kind of puts up with it. So those are things to just be listening to as your patient talks about contact lens comfort. Because for some people, they're like, oh, this is just the way it is. But we know, like, oh, we've got some things in our tool belt that we can help to address those issues and really sort of wow the patient. So moving through our case, as we start to look at clinical data, entering acuities, and the patient has her contact lenses in, but also has this habitual pair of specs. So visual acuities 20/25 in the distance, 20/40 at near. All entrance testing generally unremarkable. You can see here the habitual spec prescription, which is just a single vision distance pair of glasses, 2 to 3 years old. We move into our refraction, and our subjective refraction that we get, you can see on the screen there. So -3, -0.5, axis 175, -325 sphere. Also, knowing that we're looking at a patient who is presbyopic and has some increased near demand, we're looking at our ad starting at a 150, not quite that balance we want with the NRA PRA. So with an adjustment, we actually get a pretty good balanced NRA PRA. So I'll ask you, just as you look at the habitual spec prescription and the subjective, what do you notice sort of between the difference between those two prescriptions? What do you kind of see as far as a trend in the prescription?
Yeah, so looking at it, the patient's definitely over minus a bit. And whether that's and that can be from a couple of things. The patient's prescription could have changed over the last, I think it was 3 years since she had been in. Or the refraction at the last visit, she could have just been over minus. It's fairly easy to do that if we're not careful. So that's why I think it's always really important to get a fresh refraction. You don't want to just trust another optometrist's work or refraction. We went to school to learn how to do this. We're trained to do this. So make sure you get a fresh set of numbers from yourself, because remember, it's going to be your name on the chart. That's the thing that comes to mind. I want to start from scratch here, make sure I get my numbers there, and make sure we're not over minusing the patient.
Yes, I think that is crucial, because over minusing in your patient for a multifocal can really just put you off to a bad start from the beginning, because it kind of counter affects what the optical design of a multifocal is trying to do. And so we look at with our techniques sort of to consider when we're thinking about over minusing or avoiding over minusing. We've got a few things we can do. Monocular plus buildup, or some people refer to it as plus to blur, and that's a individual eye test. Your binocular balance or prism dissociation is done when we're adding those Risley prism in, and we're sort of creating this disparate or dissociated image to compare one eye to the other. Preference for me, I tend to look at the monocular bichrome test, which is our red-green balance test. And this just gives us an opportunity to use our chromatic aberrations and what we know about optics to really get an idea, is this prescription balanced for that patient? And with this test, so we've got our VA chart up, we've added our red-green filter, we've created some blur, so about 3 clicks of blur to have some disparity in those two images. And what we're looking for is, how do we balance, are we adding plus or are we adding minus to be able to create a screen that is equally clear for the patient? So that tends to work pretty well, even if the patient is, colorblind or has any sort of color vision deficiency. The optics of the test will still work. They may not see particular red or green, but they'll see two different clarities of image because it's about wavelength of light, not necessarily the exact color. So that tends to be something that I will use and encourage students to use if we're looking at a patient that we want to be sure that we aren't over minusing and kind of getting us started with that fresh refraction, like you mentioned.
Right, yeah. And another thought I had when I was thinking about this case is, sometimes if I have a refraction where I'm just having a hard time getting an endpoint, or I'm not sure if I've over minused or not, sometimes I'll bust out my retinoscope. I know we don't get that out as much, especially when we're working with adults. But the retinoscope, especially if you get really good and confident with your retinoscopy, is a great objective way to find your patient's refractive error. So I always like to kind of keep that in my back pocket.
Absolutely. Keep it in your front pocket, put it in your white coat pocket, keep it close. I think that is excellent advice. So as we look at our patient, we have, again, our final prescription with our updated acuities. Just a note, as far as the add power, while we want to sort of encourage or push plus for the distance in our multifocal patients, we don't necessarily want to push or over plus them at near. And so it's important, as you are working through these multifocal fits, that you really get an idea of what their functional add power is going to be. So whether you start with their age-based add, or if you look at doing like your FCC or fused cross cylinder, or your NRA PRA, whatever that may look like, it's a really quick, efficient way to see that you've got the right near demand for that patient. Again, it's going to also save you some of that chair time on the back end by just taking a few seconds or a few minutes, depending on the test, taking that time on the front end to save it on the back end. And then one other note with our multifocals, we want to make sure we are doing that eye dominance test. And so the eye dominance, one of the things that we usually will use for patients is sighting dominance. So you want to share or kind of explain what the sighting eye dominance test is, just so we're all talking the same language.
Yeah, so the sighting, if I remember right, that's the technique where you just have the patient kind of make a triangle with or a diamond with their hands. And so you put out a distant target, maybe a 2060, 2050 letter, and you have them put that letter in the center of that diamond they've created with their hands. and then you have them move their hands closer to their face. And they will either go to their right or their left eye, and whichever one they go to, you can assume that's the dominant eye.
Right. Yep. So that's a pretty quick, easy way that we've all kind of learned about sighting or determining eye dominance. One of the things, and what you'll see as we look at some of the fitting guides, one of the ways we can do this that can be more accurate for a successful fit is what's called the sensory dominance test. And so that's where when the patient is fully corrected, you actually take a trial lens. And of course, got a handy trial lens. Is, why not? Who doesn't have their trial lenses at home, I guess? But you take that trial lens when the patient's binocular, hold it over one eye, compare it to the other. What we're looking for is, when does that distance chart get blurry? And which eye does it happen over? Because what that tells us is that patient can't really tolerate additional plus over that particular eye. So for instance, I'm holding it over my right eye, I'm looking with both eyes, still pretty clear on the screen. Move over to my left, everything kind of gets a little fuzzy. That lets us know that my left eye is my dominant eye because I can't really tolerate that extra plus. That becomes important for your multifocals when you start to, if you need to make modifications, you're able to make modifications according to the fitting guide that take into account eye dominance. So it's pretty easy test to add again to the front end to help save you some time so you aren't having to troubleshoot on the back end. So as we move through our case, ocular health in general, overall not too bad. There is a little bit of makeup debris noted in the lids and lashes. Generally adequate lacrimal lake. Conj looks pretty clear. We do notice, and this is the patient's right eye, there is some very small punctate sort of hyperfluorescent staining that we see there. So something, again, to keep in mind as we're now making a decision about what lens are we going to pull to get this patient happy and comfortable with their vision. Yeah, did you want to add something?
Oh, no, that's okay. I totally agree.
All right. So then we look at our assessment and plan. So with this patient, we determine, what their refractive error is. And in this case, because of the patient's vision demands with the distance, the intermediate, the near, the frequent regular computer or digital device use, and then just the very mild but present signs of ocular surface changes, we looked at fitting the patient into the OASYS Max 1-Day. That gave us an opportunity to pull, again, that new technology that kind of addresses all of the aspects of this patient's vision and complaint that she had on the front end. It kind of gives us an opportunity to get her fit in something that's newer and available to us and see what she thinks about it. So as we look at our plan, so one thing I want to bring up and just reiterate is the fitting guide, which can be a great resource or tool for us because it helps us minimize some of that chair time because it gives us the exact steps that we need for our initial trial lens pull to be able to send the patient home in contact lens that day. And so with the fitting guide for this particular lens, what it does is it tells us, and we won't go into too much detail, but it really tells us based on their add power, what near add we need to add onto their distance prescription. And that is just based on what you recorded when you did your refraction. So in our case, we had a patient that had needed a plus 125 add. So we would add a low and a low on each eye with their distance prescription. What's also nice about these fitting guides is it then will tell you, so when you have that patient back in your exam chair after their 1 to 2 week follow-up, and you say, what's going well, what's not going well, these are the things that you said you wanted to achieve, how are we doing with those? And you bring that back to the patient and they say, oh, well, maybe this could be better, or maybe I thought more about this and I like better near or reading vision. The fitting guide then tells you what your next step might be. So again, it takes a little bit of some of that legwork out, so it makes it a little more efficient for you.
Yeah, definitely. And we want these fitting guides to be our friends here. Multifocals are amazing technology. They really help. They really help patients. And we as optometrists definitely want to understand the optics and the technology that go into the lenses. But these fitting guides really make it an easy step-by-step process for us to streamline this for patients.
Absolutely. All right, so we will bring Dr. Fardink back up, I believe. He's still hanging out with us.
Here.
All right. So one of the things that I thought from this case that we could kind of talk about is just how we tie together or connect the patient's lifestyle to when you start to look at their lens wear or the lens selection you're going to make. So Dr. Fardink, tell us just in your experience, in your practice, I know you have an amazing contact lens practice. So just tell us, some tools or things that you're using to kind of tie those things together, lifestyle and lens selection.
Yeah, well, it's important to come back to some of the things that your patient was saying. Patient said, my contacts aren't working anymore. And to me, that means my eyes aren't functioning the way I expect them to function. Really have to be a little detective here and figure out what are their expectations and what are they doing. We understand the eye inside and out. We know how the eye changes with age. We understand the vision changes that are happening, but our patients don't. This is a mystery to them, what's happening to their own eyes. So we have to educate them, explain to them what's happening in presbyopia, why their vision isn't functioning the way it used to, and then elucidate what their needs are throughout the days by asking them, what are you doing? Are you looking at your iPad when you're going back and forth between patients or between clients? Are you in the warehouse a lot looking at far away things written on the wall? You have to really be a detective and figure out what they need and what their expectations are, and then educate them so that they develop realistic expectations of what they can achieve.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's crucial, that realistic expectations, is while we want to be able to offer everything, sometimes we have to shift it and make it more realistic and reasonable for what the technology will allow us to do.
Absolutely.
So let me ask, as far as your follow-ups and what type of things when you have your patient back after you fit them maybe in a new multifocal, or you've changed their prescription or their design, what type of things are you asking, or how are you considering when to make adjustments when you bring that patient back?
Well, when the patient comes back in, typically I'll do a 1-week follow-up and see how they've been doing. Always make sure that they have enough lenses to get them through to their follow-up, first of all, to make sure they have enough lenses to really wear them and see how they work for them. And when the patient comes back in, I ask them, how have things been going? Do you feel that your vision has been working for you better? Are you able to see your iPad between clients? Are you seeing what's written in the warehouse walls? Make notes in my chart here so I can remember what their needs are. I can ask them about it. And I always want to help guide them into really being successful with the contact lenses. Like, oh, it's working great. Really help them, help sell them on how good their vision is, because you're not going to have vision like they did 20 years ago, but they're going to have vision that works for them and is functional. And we have to help them, learn the difference.
That's it. Awesome. And Jacob, anything to add just in your experience and communicating with patients and how you kind of either set expectations or address those follow-up type of visits?
It's all about, like we said, managing expectations up front and really preparing patients, letting them know, hey, this road of presbyopia, it's going to be a long road, but we're going to be on it together. And like you said, they're not going to see like they saw 20 years ago, but we're going to do the very best we can. And just making sure they know, if maybe we have to take a little bit from distance to make the near better or vice versa, just making sure they understand.
And let's not forget also to educate our patients, not just on how their eyes work, but also how these lenses work. J&J's multifocals here, they're pupil optimized design. They've got different size optic zones based off of what J&J believes the patient's pupil size to be, based off of their refractive needs and their ad based off of their age. So the multifocal tends to work really well because it's optimized on the size of the patient's pupil, basically, given their power and their ad. So the patient may have already been in dailies, may have been in multifocal dailies, but remind the patient that not all multifocal dailies are the same. Different optics, different materials will function differently for them, and might have a lot of success with that.
Absolutely, yes. And then on top of that design, you've got your new additions to some of those ACUVUE lenses with the tear stable technology, OptiBlue filters. So those just give us additional points of education for patients about what makes the lens that you're selecting unique.
Yeah, and Dr. Wright, you made a great point earlier about making sure that you have the functional ad for the patient. And I've had a lot of success also with J&J's Fit Calculator, using that to go back in and determine which lens to pull for the patient. Sometimes I'll be overplussing my patients without realizing it, and the Fit Calculator helps get me back on track to get the correct ad.
Absolutely, yes. It's nice to have that little safety check if we need it. All right. And then just lastly, as we kind of wrap up with a few other tips and things we've learned along the way, is just when we're troubleshooting. So, and we've kind of just touched on some of this stuff, is understanding that lens design, what makes a lens unique compared to another lens, and why you may be selecting a particular lens for a patient. Jacob, you mentioned this earlier with starting with a fresh refraction and how important that is for a successful multifocal fit. So sometimes, we get into a hurry and, we're moving quickly through patients, but you see that multifocal fit in your chair, it's probably time to slow down and make sure we're getting good, accurate data on the front end. We also kind of talked about vision and comfort and patient education, but other things that you guys would maybe recommend, or things to have the folks that are watching kind of keep in mind to avoid some of those missteps, kind of save them some time on the front end.
Well, I just want to agree with what you said before. I was thinking about my dad teaching me how to build things in the garage. Measure carefully, cut once. Well, refract carefully, fit once is what I would recommend here. We've got these tools. We've got the training, the binocular blur balance, the bichrome monocular test. Use these tools in the beginning. Get a refraction that you're confident with, and everything else falls into place well using the fitting guide, in my experience.
Yeah, and I wanted to say too, I noticed in the chief complaint, the patient mentioned that she's uncomfortable towards the end of the day, but it's tolerable. And I think we can hear that. And like you said, Dr. Wright, if we're in a hurry, it might be like, okay, they can deal with it and move on. But I don't want my patients to just tolerate something. I want to make sure they're happy. I want to make sure my patients are really wowed by how good of a job I did. I don't want them to just tolerate. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, yes. Listening to our patients, it will get us a long way for sure. Of course. All right. Well, I think that's it, Dr. Glover, if you're still hanging around here with us.
Oh, yeah. I'm always in the mix. I'm always here. Super excited about this fantastic grand rounds. A lot of great information. Dr. Wright, Dr. Fardink, I don't know about you, but I was really blown away by Jacob's responses. I mean, I wrote down a couple of things. Number one, use the fitting guides, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you learn earlier on in your career that you don't have all the answers, and the fitting guides or fitting calculators that will do all the work, do that, because I did it the hard way. I thought I knew everything, and I just started fitting contact lens like I normally do. But with this innovation and technology, and in particular with this optimized pupil design, you really want to let the machine do the work for you and look like the hero in that exam lane. The other thing I really loved that Jacob mentioned was he doesn't want his patients to just tolerate a lens technology or comfort. He wants to make sure that his patients are happy. If you say that to every patient that walks through your door,
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, you will have patients for your entire life, and you'll have these patients become walking billboards for you. Patients just want you to practice empathy. They want you to understand what they're going through. They want you to find the right solution. And we live in an age and an era now where there's a lot of innovation at your fingertips. It's up to you if you really want to have that conversation and build with your patients. So I just want to say fantastic job. Dr. Wright, Dr. Fardink, always fantastic job with moderating. What we're going to do next is just really jump into the raffles, right?
All right.
We got a lot of students on, and the students were here to learn and, take their clinical skills to the next level. But we also have some giveaways. So let's make it happen. Again, we got a couple of gift cards here, 3 in particular. Let's give a shout out to the winners. We have Shyam Patel.
Woo.
We
All right.
have Brooke from it, and Dominica Dezake.
All right. Congratulations,
All right,
guys.
congrats.
Congratulations, everyone. You will get an email from me with that Amazon gift card. And I just want to say thank you for tuning in. But thank you for also choosing this amazing profession known as optometry. Every day you're in clinic, you are helping the patient. You are helping them live their best lives. You are helping them be impactful in society. So don't take that lightly. This is a serious thing that we do day in and day out. And make sure you always leverage your team members around you. Get a mentor, talk to your professors, communicate and network with people on LinkedIn, go to conferences, and most importantly, always read the literature. And lastly, make sure you leverage your reps that come in. Reps come in and they have all the answers. They have all the solutions, believe it or not. Do not push them aside. I think because when you graduate from optometry school that you're the best thing out and you have all the answers. Leverage the people around you. It will change your life and change your career.
Absolutely.
But I want to thank again Johnson & Johnson Vision for partnering with Defocus Media. I want to thank Dr. Fardink for always hanging out with us and always giving us solid advice and knowledge. Dr. Wright, you're a rock star. Continue doing the great work you're doing at UMSO. I can't wait to get out there and visit you at some point in time. And Jacob, happy birthday, my man. Your birthday is tomorrow. I think we should all just sing him happy birthday. Why not?
Yikes.
Let's make it happen. I told you we are going to make it special, baby. Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
Jacob. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, man.
Yay! I know, that was beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Thank you.
That's how we get it in, man. That's how we get it in, man. We got a lot of people showing some love here, telling you happy birthday. I'm going to move this around a little bit, man. You got a lot of love out here. A lot of people showed up for you tonight, Jacob. So you got a good support cast out there, good fan base out there. You just continue doing the great work, my friend. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this evening. It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover. Stay healthy, stay positive, and stay blessed. We'll see you next month with another Grand Rounds. Thank you again, Johnson & Johnson Vision. Peace. All right, colleagues, and it's a wrap. Thank you dearly for hanging out with the Defocus Media team. We hope truly something resonated with you. And if it did, be sure to give us 5 stars. And make sure you follow us on all social media platforms. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you named it. And our handle is at Defocus Media on all platforms. And until next time, be sure to keep it 2020. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.